I'm Jen Mall, and welcome to Nurse Connect. I am an RN and a board-certified nurse coach. I believe that connecting with others is essential to living a happy and fulfilled life, and that sharing our stories not only helps us to heal ourselves, but also helps others by inspiring hope and optimism. I am so grateful to share stories of these incredible nurses on their journey, and I encourage you to find a way to share yours too. Thanks for listening in. Hey everybody, Jen Mall here with Nurse Connect, and I am super excited to be here with Sita today. Would you go ahead and do a little bit of introduction about yourself?
Sure, thank you. Thanks for having me. And my name is Sita, and I've been an RN for the last 17 years. And I've been a nurse coach helping men and women, overachieving men and women who feel uninspired with their passions and careers and relationships, help them fall back in love with life in those aspects. And I've been getting to hold that space for the last 3 years, and more it's becoming clear, that I like to do that with chocolate, with Guatemalan drinking chocolate.
I love it, and we're going to dig into that more because it's such a unique thing, and we are fortunate enough to actually be coworkers, which is so rare with nurse coaches to have two in the same hospital. And so it's been a really blessing to have to learn more about what you do and just the whole world of cacao and being able to bring that into our organization. And maybe we can touch on that a little bit. So I think it would be really cool. We were talking about how you help people to kind of recreate their relationship with nursing. And I think that's so beautiful because a lot of us as nurse coaches, we do kind of like, okay, I've been burned out. I'm ready to like jump out of the hospital organizational nursing realm and into my own practice. And I think you've done a really beautiful job of kind of helping people see that there's actually a different way about it. And I think that probably comes from your whole journey to getting here through your own burnout many years ago and finding cacao and into nurse coaching. And so you just have this beautiful blend. So would you mind kind of jumping back a little bit and sharing about how you became super burned out and journeyed into the world of cacao?
Thank you. Yes. Um, yes. As you know, in general, I definitely like to come from a paradigm of how do we fall back in love with the life we've created, and what parts of it don't we love, and what parts of it do we like. And
Mm-hmm.
I help support people as well as my own to be able to course correct and show up to taking action on the things we don't love.
Mm-hmm.
And although, I have been able to find a way to recreate my relationship with the nursing, um, you know, many nurse coaches, many people feel burnt out and want to jump ship. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes a break is necessary. And I
Yeah.
even took a break and was able to come back full circle, learning what I learned away and really taking a stand to apply it rather than constantly wanting to flee from one thing to
Mm-hmm.
another. And my journey definitely started well before nursing school and during nursing school.
Mm-hmm.
Just growing up in a duty filled household,
Mm-hmm.
I felt like, naturally nursing was a profession where I could help people and do good in the
Mm-hmm.
world. And, by the time I got into nursing school, I learned the bad habit of learning to put myself on the back burner and compartmentalize just so I can get through this exam, just so I can get to another exam, another semester, another semester. By the
Sounds
time I
great.
graduated from nursing school, I was a complete stranger to myself. I could feel like
Yeah.
something wasn't off. Like I should be stoked about the fact that I've
Mm-hmm.
graduated, and really just noticing a lot of indecisiveness, just
Mm-hmm.
from ignoring myself and my needs for a long time. And
Mm-hmm.
kind of noticed it then, but as life has it, once you graduate from nursing school, you got all the student loan debt, and it's just time to hurry up and start working again.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I ended up just jumping into nursing and following and compartmentalizing more there, and coping by just
Mm-hmm.
one more day, one foot in front of the other. to the point where life became, I felt like a robot.
Mm-hmm.
There was no Sita inside that, I gave space for to help add color to the show. And I just kind of let duty and responsibility and job obligations and showing up for the shift and being a team player and just trying to maintain all of um, life. I just let that kind of run the show. And, I created a great life when on paper,
Sure.
I was in New York City, working up at Mount Sinai Hospital, married by then, had the apartment, had all the things that I should
Mm-hmm.
like. And, eventually I was just like, I don't know who shoulds these are, like
Right.
society and doing all the right things. And I feel like a shell of a person. And
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
spirit has left a long time ago and I've not called it back. And
Yeah.
um yeah, I was years into working at Mount Sinai Hospital where I actually hired my first life coach, transformative coach,
Mm.
when I was 24. I could sense something wasn't right, and I was really determined to, to acknowledge that that was a life that I carefully created,
Mm-hmm.
and had a lot on the line, a nursing career,
Right.
student loans, and I needed to find a way how to like, stick with this, stick it out,
Yeah.
and coaching was super helpful. It got me to a particular point, and I'm so glad I had a coach at that time because,
Mm-hmm.
eventually, my MO with her was to find meaning in my work.
Sure.
Um, and, oftentimes it was just a moral dilemma, feeling like I'm just throwing meds at people,
Right.
trying to get out of the room as soon as possible, working with a lot of frequent flyers, just, ticking things off a list. And after a while, I'm like, it feels like I'm just doing this for the paycheck. That doesn't
Right.
feel right to me. I
Right.
know it's a noble profession, but I couldn't really just feel the heart of nursing.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't feel it, and I couldn't feel my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, she would ask these, particular questions about who I
Mm-hmm.
truly was and about happiness and like opening up to unconditional love for myself and the universe, being able to really access the feeling
Yeah.
of love. And I remember, like, even with my spouse and the people around me in my life, and I knew people loved me, and
Of
I knew I
course.
could love. And maybe love was just like the showing up to obligations that
Mm-hmm.
we kind of should, and I know it was doing that out of a higher love, but I couldn't really
Mm-hmm.
feel it
Feel it.
particularly. It was
Yeah.
just so shut down for myself. And
Wow.
whenever she would ask those kind of questions, I would just immediately shut down because I was scared that if I started to ask myself seriously, like what would make Sita happy, that it might not look like the life I really carefully
Yeah.
invested into creating. And, when she'd ask this question, it would, she deserves like a medal because she's like super patient, stuck with me, hard when, I needed to have someone being hard on me, but
Sure.
um, I would shut down and I just wasn't there. So in truth coaching fashion, we meet our clients where they're at, and,
Mm-hmm.
we did our best until eventually it caught up with me where my health started exhibiting a lot
Mm-hmm.
of signs of inflammation, autoimmune kind of
Mm.
responses. I was only 29 at that point,
Jeez.
much too young, like to, just have a chronic inflammation and pain.
Right.
And yeah, I really loved life in the city up to a certain point, but I realized, this doesn't make sense to be paying at the time $3,000 on an apartment to
Wow.
stay home and watch Netflix because that's all I have energy for.
Yeah.
Like, why live in this exciting city if I'm just staying in all the
Sure.
time? And it was, it was hard because it was my body, as if I had no say in the matter, that was
Mm-hmm.
deciding for me that I need to stop and slow down and really ask myself some harder questions that I've been avoiding or trying to just
Mm-hmm.
maybe address, but not really fully play full out and go there. And at that time, I just remember being pissed and angry that like my
Yeah.
health was failing. I
Yeah.
started exhibiting at work, lower back pain. Eventually, it was my manager that kind of took me aside and I still think the coworkers that might have spoken up because, my
Yeah.
manager was like,
Worried
people are a
about
little
you.
worried about you, and, you're getting stressed out by things you normally wouldn't be stressed out
Hmm.
by. Like, are you okay? And, of course, the flood of tears, came up in that confrontation.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the courage to decide for myself that I needed a break, that I didn't know what I needed.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful that someone said something and
Hmm.
made, made me really stop and think. And for, eventually, I realized I had a herniated disc. The
Mm.
spine specialist said most people actually have herniated discs, but it's not something that necessarily bothers everyone all the time. If we
Oh,
are
wow.
chronically stressed, chronically inflamed, then we have like these inflammatory chemicals, basically
Hmm.
through our body. So it's going to cause more inflammation, and then we're going to notice that pain a little more.
Hmm.
And yeah, at the time, I'd been going to him, many doctors. Once, I made it my full-time job to
Sure.
figure out
Wow.
what was wrong with me once I didn't have my nursing job and I was on a leave of absence.
Mm.
And I grew frustrated because no one had answers for me. I was
Yeah.
going to physical therapy, doctor's appointments, chiropractor, all the things. And yeah, eventually my coach asked me some really hard questions that I hung up on her because she asked me the question of, um, you know, why are you choosing the experience of pain?
Ooh, that's tough.
Yeah, and
Mm.
I felt so offended by that question.
Hmm.
And I hung up on her and I really thought about that. And I said, damn, she's right. And
Yeah.
just noticing what I was, in the transformative coaching model that she uses, we really look at, that we create our experience and
Hmm.
that there's something in us getting something out of being in pain. And I realized then what I was
Mm.
getting out of being in pain. And it was kind of a lifetime of choosing pain, not the love and the happiness that at that
Sure.
point I knew pain. I was comfortable with pain. I could somatically journey with pain. As nurses, we get roll up our sleeves when it comes to pain, and like we do
Hmm.
something
Push
about
through it.
it. We're just like we push through all kinds of things. We're just tough.
Yeah.
Well, we push through so much discomfort to be, a nurse on a shift. So like familiar with that, but not familiar with like love and light and all
Oof.
the other things. And it was a hard journey of stopping and surrendering and knowing where my emotional attachments with pain was. And
Yeah.
yeah, in my case, it was just like, creates the need of the false sense of importance, earning
Hmm.
my keep. If I choose pain or, like I'm in pain, then like it gives me some kind of validity here
Hmm.
in my family, my tribe, whatever that is. There's some reptilian brain thing going on
Yeah.
there. Definitely asking myself, like, who would I be if I was able to let go of this pain? And could I still receive the same payoffs in a healthier way? And
Wow.
yeah, and that was eventually I got to the point where I was just so grateful for my back pain
Hmm.
and that we have the ability to turn pain into gold.
Wow.
Um, yeah, that pain led me to leaving New York City. I realized I needed a break, and
Hmm.
I went to home, to kind of try to remember who I was and get
Sure.
who I was and a break from the city and the high overhead and kind of get my wits about me.
Hmm.
And I remember my intention was just to learn to be taken care of since I've been such a,
Mm.
caregiver, a burnt
For
out
everybody
caregiver,
else.
a
Yeah.
resentful caregiver, and
Yep.
learn to untie that. And yeah, I decided to eventually a long series. I think you and Rachel spoke about the artist way, and that was a really
Yeah.
influential tool at that time when I left New York City. Because the day I left the position, I found myself in an art store. I've never painted anything in my life at that point. I'm like, why am I here? But I was just guided
Hmm.
to like colors and canvases,
Oh,
and then
wow.
I started painting, and I'm like, what is this? I started feeling some soul retrieval happening with
Oh,
the
beautiful.
creativity process. And yeah, I mean, one thing led to another, and I eventually decided on, I was finally at the point in my life where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go back to the bedside.
Yeah.
I am going to find out who I am, regardless of all the expectations of who I
Mm-hmm.
should be and all the society's idea of who I should be, and the fact
Mm-hmm.
that I should be a nurse because I went to nursing school and I have all this student loan debt. So, there's
Yeah.
so many things that was just like, I just needed a break to be able to figure out who I am. And maybe I don't want to be a nurse. Maybe I don't like being a nurse. I couldn't, it's hard for me to say or be in the question of that.
Sure.
And, but I told myself, well, if I find out who I am and it brings me back to being a nurse, then I'll be open to it then. But I can't answer that question when I'm in the same, in that situation of exposing
Yeah.
myself to the same kind of habits. And the only way I knew how to be a nurse was just a task-driven nurse who got, my charting in time so I can, after a 12-hour work day, make it home after 13 hours down the subway and just try to like really clock
Mm-hmm.
out at the right time. And that's the only kind of nursing I knew. And
Wow.
can't go back to that. And I decided that, I needed a break and maybe the permission that I might leave nursing and never return to it. And I just needed to give
Wow.
myself that permission to be okay with that. And that was allowed. Um, and so I ended up embarking on a journey to Central America. I thought I would travel all around Central America. Originally, I thought I would go to Asia, but my health was struggling and
Mm-hmm.
felt really far away. And
Mm-hmm.
I decided somewhere closer to home where it'd feel easier to fly back, worst case scenario,
If
because I
yeah.
was literally just putting one foot in front of the other. And I was just trying to listen to the calls, trying to
Mm-hmm.
finally ask myself, like, okay, follow my joy. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
At the time, I had no idea what that was. But I thought I would go to Guatemala because I knew I liked coffee and I would study
Uh-huh.
coffee. I had no idea what that was going to
That's
do for me.
amazing.
Yeah, and I thought there's something in there, I guess they say if you follow your joy that, maybe I felt like I was following the breadcrumbs, like something
Yeah.
would come with that. And I don't know if anything would really, but maybe I'll learn something about myself along that journey.
Mm-hmm.
So for once in my life, I let myself go against all the shoulds, really ingrained in me as a child to
Yeah.
go against all that and go, go out on a limb and not knowing what the outcome would be. And my case was travel, studying, coffee. I went to Guatemala. They have a great coffee program. I studied with, high people in the industry. I was at the time, maybe I'll open up a coffee shop. I don't
Oh
know.
yeah.
Go back to nursing. I could tell that there was a serious part in me that wanted
Mm-hmm.
to like find it and like let
Mm-hmm.
coffee shop be the thing I'm going to be doing and get all serious with investors. And I could recognize that, like, okay, before I jump into another marriage or career, let me
Yeah.
just see if I could like find myself and not get lost in something else. I had that tendency,
Yeah.
easier to put on an identity rather than find out who I really was from a.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, coffee is what led me to healing my heart with chocolate. Coffee and chocolate grow side by side in a lot of climates in
Wow.
Guatemala. And as I was telling my story to a lot of people in the coffee industry and educators, they would ask me if I knew anything about chocolate and that maybe I should check it out because there was a tradition in Guatemala of drinking chocolate when it comes to broken hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up volunteering in Guatemala for some time, and I didn't pursue the chocolate thing until a lot of the local indigenous peoples there were telling me about this chocolate and that they could sense I had a broken heart and that there was something
Wow.
heal there. And yeah, I mean, that embarked on a journey to be able to kind of continue a lot of the somatic healing I was
Mm-hmm.
doing. Picking up where I left off with my coach. And by then I was doing a lot of the work on my own, being able to hold my own space, but
Mm.
with matters of allowing some light in the places of pain,
Mm-hmm.
I would still shut down. And it was in those first experiences of learning what it was to heal with chocolate, what the tradition was with healing with chocolate, what medicinal and ceremonial purposes chocolate
Oh.
has, and being open to that experience. You know, it was my first chocolate sitting or chocolate ceremony that
Mm.
I was able to continue doing a lot of somatic work, but for the first time I was able to actually experience just a little golden love and appreciation around my pain, and
Mm-hmm.
letting filling some of that space in with pain. So
Mm.
immediately I was hooked. I'm like, oh, okay, if you can heal your heart with chocolate, sign me up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, I ended up staying in Guatemala over the course of 3 years, off and on,
Mm-hmm.
and diving into a lot of the cultures there and the culture around
Mm-hmm.
drinking chocolate. And, you know, eventually the feeling of returning to the US was coming up for me.
Mm.
And I wanted to take this amazing medicinal drink and share it with all people, you know, people back at home, to be able to share it. And I wasn't quite convinced of whether I was supposed to travel the US and do chocolate circles. Didn't quite feel like it was it. And, you know, eventually I ended up landing here in California, and I was still not, I was, you know, staying with friends that, you know, we went way back in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I was still determined not to go back to the bedside at that time,
Mm.
just picking up a lot of odd jobs, and, you know, with the idea of like just buying myself more time till I figure out I could get behind what the thing is for me, or who I
Yeah.
am, what do I need to be doing in my life. And the interesting part is that I didn't, you know, at some point I ran out of savings, and I couldn't get to that point where, like, you know, I made an agreement with myself that I'm not going to return back to the bedside unless I really know I want to.
Good for you.
And, you know, in all disclosure, I wasn't at that point when I ran out of money, it was a battle. I didn't
Yeah.
feel like I made it to that point where I could make that agreement. And, you know, I kind of felt like I was betraying something. I
Mm.
mean, I was feeling of like, you know, betrayal within, as far as like, well, out of necessity,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm picking up these odd jobs, but my symptoms are flaring up again after
Mm.
for a long time. And,
Wow.
you know, I kept my licenses up to date. I always advocate that you do. And, you know, at some point I'm like, yeah, I almost felt like a dog with its tail in between its legs when, you know, I'm like, out of necessity, I kind of have to, you know, it
Mm.
makes sense. And I kind of rather be at the bedside than all these funny heart, you know, like odd jobs I was
Interesting.
doing.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was actually out of necessity at that time that I had to go back. And it brought up so much for me, of
I
course.
bet. Yeah.
That whole process that I was going against myself, my intuition, you know, all the things, you know, that
Mm.
I got a taste of what spirit is and what the spirit within me
Mm-hmm.
was. And then suddenly the feeling of having to don scrubs and become like this uniform
Mm-hmm.
cog in a system, was bringing up a lot for me. I remember like even some,
Sure.
a lot of things were coming up, and you know, but every time I really gave it time to be with my true self, my higher self,
Mm-hmm.
it felt like the most self-loving thing was,
Mm.
and it kept coming back to that. And you know, at the time I realized there was a higher lesson being asked of me of I can go back to my bedside and I can continue being 100% in control of my creating
Mm-hmm.
my reality. And how do I want to recreate this reality moving forward with what I've learned about myself in all these years? And like, how do I want to create a different outcome?
Mm-hmm.
And that, you know, oftentimes, you know, many of us feel like, you know, it's a system, there's not much things we can do within
Mm-hmm.
change. But I can show up differently and choose how
Mm-hmm.
I want to respond and feel, around going back to the bedside. And it was a process for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Um, you know, in my moments of freak out, I just remember I would drive to interviews and had to pull over to the side of the road because suddenly my shoulders were up here. I was
Yeah.
having like this moment of panic, and there was just so much good learning and gold even from those moments. I just remember pulling over and I'm like, what is this feeling? And this is familiar. Like I remember
Yeah.
this familiar feeling, and I'm like, you know, simple terms, fight or flight, stress, you know, like
Sure.
alarm saying, don't go, don't go. But I knew by then that every time I asked my higher self, it was going back to the bedside. And I knew by then the most self loving thing for me at the time was to go back to the bedside. but somatically in the
Sure.
cellular memory, my
Your body
body
is fighting you.
freaking out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just remember just giving space to all of that. You know, it was
Wow.
a process of interviewing, of deciding. It,
Hmm.
you know, was a process I knew I couldn't figure out, you know, in that moment, and that I have to continue figuring out even while I was at the bedside.
Hmm.
And, you know, I just chose to commit to the process of really holding space
Beautiful.
for my feelings. And yeah, I just remember having this moment, like this aha moment where, you know, I was on that way to the interview, and I could feel all this panic coming in. And
Mm.
like, when was the earliest time I remember this? I'm like, this is a familiar feeling. And it took me a couple of breaths to put my finger on it. I'm like, oh, this is that feeling that I would have every time I would get on the 6 train and go up to Mount Sinai to go to work. It's this feeling of like life
Hmm.
and death, because
Hmm.
life is in our hands and everything's just so teetering. I was in the cardiac ICU then, so there was just lots of codes and
Hmm.
failure, and just things can go, you know, just life is teetering. And it was
Yeah.
just, for years I lived, you know, 8 years at Mount Sinai with that same feeling. And even though I wasn't a novice, I realized I still carried that, even though I thought I was
Sure.
better of a nurse and I was a lot more comfortable in the role. But it was all the same feelings from like my first couple of years of feeling like,
Hmm.
have I harmed someone? Like, what's going to
Hmm.
happen to me? Like this feeling of finality and like death. And
Yeah.
um, you know, when I recognized that, I chose to reach out to a therapist
Yeah.
and, you know, EMDR and sessions to,
Mm.
you know, she recognized that this is post-traumatic stress.
Sure.
You know, we're one of the most traumatized careers. You know, we are
Hmm.
traumatized, and that, you know, it felt like a little bit of a blow, or it felt a little extreme when
Sure.
traumatic stress, especially back then. And but yeah, you know, I was really reliving a lot of the trauma of just like the fear of going to work.
Wow.
Like, I know, you know, I had to tell myself, I know this is not the same situation, not the
Hmm.
same unit, not the same city, circumstances
Sure.
are different. Can I recreate a different response? And, you know, I did a lot of work with retraining my nervous system to be
Hmm.
able to um, look forward to and embrace going back to the bedside. And
Wow.
just that all in itself was just like the, you know, so many gold nuggets of learning and seeing what I was capable of doing. And that, like, yes, I needed to honor myself by leaving the
Hmm.
bedside and finally listening to who I was, but by then I knew how to access who I was. And higher self kept saying go back. And that yeah, I mean, this is a lot, but like the idea of like I can recreate my experience here. And,
Yes.
you know, a big mantra that kind of kept me going at the time was just that, you know, there was a big fear that I'm going to lose myself again. That's
Hmm.
I lost myself so much with nursing, with my whole experience, that I'm going to lose myself. And that,
Hmm.
you know, having to don scrubs was just like a whole process that brought up a lot. And like, you
Hmm.
know, where am I? Like, how can I bring spirit to the bedside? How can I bring like this crusty granola hippie I'd become into this professional workspace and still not feel like I had to like play a role and like push meds?
Yeah.
And, like, how can I really bring Sita, this colorful human
Yes.
essence of who I am, into the workplace, and not lose myself and not have nursing take away my dreams that I was
Yes.
just going to create. And I chose to spin it around, and I asked myself every day the question of like, how can I make nursing work for my dreams?
Oh,
How can I
wow.
use this time to really let nursing not get in the way of who I am and what my dreams are, but
Hmm.
how can I let it support my dreams? You know, in this case, it
Beautiful.
was a paycheck. I kind of needed
Yeah.
to allow, but I'm like, how can I really leverage this opportunity so I don't recreate losing myself, and in fact that I could support more of who I am, so I don't have to
Hmm.
live in fear of when I'm going to get my next, you know, like meal and all these
Right.
things. And it's been an amazing process, not an easy process, but an amazing process in that paradigm shift of, I gave up my dreams to be a nurse, and how can nursing actually support my dreams? And I get fired up. I can, you know, speak for, you know, a long time around what that paradigm shift could look like for
Yeah.
different people. You know, I love supporting my clients around this. You know, a lot of my clients are unique because, you know, their wisdom tells them not to leave the bedside
Hmm.
right now, and that but there are a lot of course correction, a lot of different kind of positions we might realize you would be more supportive, that would leave one with energy after a shift to be able to really follow through with their dreams. And it takes some discipline with not using tiredness as an excuse.
Yes.
You're going to work a 12-hour shift, you're not going to have much time, 3 to 4 days a week of doing that for your dreams. And like we find that balance, and it requires a lot of discipline, and still, even if you're tired, still showing up for the meaningful things. Because it's so easy for myself and a lot of nurses to blame nursing for getting in the way of having a life outside of nursing. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. But
wow, what a journey. So you've been back at the bedside for a couple of years. Have you been able to really maintain this love of nursing supporting your dreams? Do you feel like you've been able to really embrace that?
Well, like I said, it's been a process, and it's funny, I'm getting a call from the hospital right now.
And decline. That's okay. You can't ignore phone calls.
Put on airplane mode. Here you go. That's so ironic. There's always going to be needs, COVID, disasters. We have emergency, systems texting that they're super short, and it's a process of learning how to set boundaries, how to protect the sprout that is beginning to come into strong roots as a creative, as a dreamer, as someone who has passions to really help and serve humanity. And it's hard to put fences up to protect that from other purposes. And sometimes it does mean not taking on overtime, and like learning to say no to the idea of being a team player, learning to say no to just saying things out of obligation and fear-based decisions, honestly. And if we
and the guilt of letting your teammates down, and patience, like it's real. It's very difficult.
It's real. It's hard. I still help whenever I can. That's like, if it's a true yes, and not a fear-based help, but an actual courageous yes. And it takes a lot more courage to learn how to just put our foot down. It's definitely been a process, and it's easy to go in and out of. It's definitely in the last few years, since I've actually feel like I'm fully showing up to a passion and my true purpose, which happens to be nurse coaching. And just as I started that process, even during COVID, finally I got to the point where like, wow, like I'm so grateful for this job I have. I'm so grateful that I happen to work per diem. So like I get to work like 2 days a week, and it really supports my dream. I love it, at the bedside.
Amazing.
I love my coworkers. I literally walk out of the hospital so many days with just like thanking the walls, thanking everybody in there. And because it has allowed me to really step into my true purpose. And and there are moments I can just bring that purpose to the bedside, to my clients, in the way I speak to them, and perhaps coach them a little bit, or get curious, really. But it hasn't been an easy process. It took a long time for me to hold that intention. Honestly, I didn't know what it looked like to, I got good clues and lessons of what it looks like to make nursing work for me, but I wasn't clear on what the purpose that I was trying to work towards outside of nursing at the time was. Still unable to really grasp that, and it felt a little fleeting. So I just went back to the bedside for years, actually, just holding that intention of, I know I'm supposed to be here. I know I'm creating resources so I can do something to serve humanity. I'm still not sure if it's nursing, but I'm just holding the intention and kind of getting ready for, battle or whatever. Like I'm just building my resources. I'm waiting for the next call. I'm waiting for the next sign. But it was years of that, and that gets uncomfortable too. Not knowing of like, okay, I'm going back. I know I'm supposed to be here. I'm not quite sure what these paychecks are for. At that time, I paid off lots of debt. I knew I was just building my resources for something. right before I found nurse coaching. I've always liked the coaching industry.
Yeah.
I've always resonated with it. I had done a lot of work holding healing, transformative healing space with Guatemalan chocolate by then.
Mhm.
But I was
Yes.
desiring some more skills and solid credentials. So, it got to the point right before I decided to go the coaching route that maybe I'll jump ship again, actually, and
Mhm.
use this opportunity to go into becoming a therapist, because I have
Ah,
the ability to do deeper work with people.
yeah.
And at the time, I knew therapy in itself has its limitations and somewhat a
Mhm.
lot more limited than coaching. And I know therapy is a lot about, things of the past and the traumas that come up. And
Mhm.
I wasn't quite sold on that.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I had heard about nurse coaching for a while. It took me a long time to sign up. Um, and, is still in a place of like, I need to make the right decision. And
Yeah.
use these resources that I've acquired and really make the right decision. And I realized I just
Yeah.
after a year of doing that, I realized I don't know what the right decision is going to be. So let
Right.
take a use start coaching, because that seems a
Yeah.
little less hard than a 4-year master's
Sure.
program. And if anything, if it's not it, I remember there were some things that I really wanted to be able to do
Mhm.
as a healer
Mhm.
that the therapy route wouldn't actually allow
Sure.
for in many ways, and some things that coaching might let more freedom in there. And I decided just it's been a life of just putting following the breadcrumbs of like, okay, well,
Beautiful.
maybe coaching could just be a stepping stone, and
Sure.
not it, then it'll count for something if I decide to pursue a degree in being a therapist. And since I started coaching, I'm like, wow, I pinch me. I'm living the dream. I get to work at the bedside. I know exactly what it's going for, what it's building. It's to be able to do more of
Mm,
this, being able to
wow.
hold some pretty amazing adventures with my clients
Yeah.
and with nurses. And yeah, it's been a real cool full circle. Uh,
Mhm.
you know, sometimes we do need to break. Sometimes we need to break up from, partners and things, or separate or breaks, just to
Mhm.
be able to have space and learn who you are outside of that bad
Yeah.
dynamic. It's, like a lot of nursing is like being in a toxic, abusive relationship. Sometimes you just need to break away.
Mhm.
And that it's not necessarily nursing that there's anything wrong with. Yes, it's a broken system, but maybe it is about more of who we get to be as we are in these moments. Like, what light can we bring to a suffering patient? Like, what compassion can we bring on ourselves just
Mhm.
for being there at the bedside, and the agreements we're making with ourselves to be able to step up into a fuller life, and that nursing can propel us into that. But by all means, I tell my clients, don't just be a nurse. If nursing
Yes.
that fulfillment, really just leverage it, and feel like you get to be a nurse, because you get to do all these rad things with it.
I
um,
love it. That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing. As we wrap up, will you share with me a little bit more how you integrate chocolate into maybe even a daily practice for you,
yeah,
but how you integrate that with others, with your clients and your Heal Your Heart with Chocolate page? Share with me a little more about that.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I I you know I coach with ceremonial drinking chocolate. It's just been so much part of my
Mhm.
life. I remember when I started the coaching journey that I didn't want to incorporate cacao into it. It was never a vision.
Mm,
Although one of my coaches reminded me that on our first call, I did say that. I don't remember.
really?
But I have always wanted to help people in a deeply transformative space, and I wanted to be able to
Mhm.
trust my own skills to do so.
Mhm.
So for a long time, I did not incorporate the medicine, and I still don't incorporate that medicine for a lot of my clients.
Mhm.
I call it medicine, but it's just a food source.
Mhm.
It's and chocolate, like the Mayans, Aztecs, and Toltecs of Central America would use
Mhm.
chocolate for healing purposes. They would call it heart medicine. And they had some wisdom that chocolate helps us connect with ourselves, the hearts of our loved ones, and the hearts of greater community, and to be able to get out of our thinking heads and into more of an embodied state and down into our heart, so that we can feel rather than think our way through lives, and so that we can be. And so, they would, different historical accounts kind of conflict, but there's some ideas of, drinking it in conflict within community to be able to speak from the heart, to be able to speak from the heart, to be able to live from the heart. And, one of the creation stories I like about chocolate is that it came down to this world to be able to help us remember joy and ease in places that that it's hard to find that. Chocolate came down to this world to around the time of the Aztec Empire is building all the pyramids. There were a lot of slaves back then that would, toil so hard, where they weren't dreaming at night, they weren't gathering around the campfire, they weren't telling their stories like you and I are right now in this moment, telling their stories and forgetting their stories and their lineage. And chocolate recognized that people were working so hard and overworked here on Earth, and she, in Mayan mythology, every plant has a goddess, so that's why I refer to it with the pronoun as she, goddess or god, and it's a personality, and chocolate came to this world to kind of help people remember how to laugh and tell their stories, and remember and feeling joy in places where it's so hard to bring that into. So I think it's a beautiful analogy of how to bring that to the bedside, of like, how do we bring our spirit and our joy into hard places, impossible places. So in my work with clients, I see that there's, we're all carrying pain and some really difficult dynamics that feel impossible to break. The idea of like recreating a relationship with nursing feels impossible. The idea of setting boundaries with family members that are, some toxic relationships there that are just impossible. We can, do those things in certain aspects of our life, but when it comes to like the one relationship with career, with family, with spouse, it's always a challenge. And so I like to use chocolate in those particular areas where it feels utterly impossible, because there's so much pain and resentment still there, and bring some of that joy, and we let the medicine bring joy to those areas, so that we can experience that what's there on the other side of pain, that there's actually a lot of gold. Chocolate in general just kind of helps us. There's lots of naturally occurring compounds, phenylalanine, naturally occurring SSRIs and MAOIs, antidepressants, compounds that help us feel bliss. So, we end up feeling in a more relaxed state to be able to get creative and find solutions around really difficult parts of our lives. And I love to do that in a coaching space with or without chocolate, but I find the chocolate is an accelerator to some of the stories that feel really challenging. And the results of what's been created is just amazing. It always continues to blow my mind. And I like chocolate. It's a plant medicine, but it's not a hallucinogen. Oftentimes they're illegal, and and like makes you see things and feel things that you don't have control over. And chocolate's not that. It is just a yummy cup of chocolate. But the chocolate I work with has some compounds that allows the cortisol to decrease and the fight or flight to decrease, and it helps us come into more of a being state, access our being. And I use a lot of shamanic journeying with my clients, and visualizations and somatic experiencing. And we get to, when we get to incorporate chocolate, it just makes it a little more real for people, rather than psychedelic assisted therapy, where we might not be in control. We're relying on an outside source to come to certain realizations. This is all just bringing out the innate wisdom within that client, which is kind of what coaching already is. But it's more accelerated and more pronounced and a little more tangible to feel. That's kind of what it looks like.
I love it.
Yeah.
Having done a cacao ceremony with you, it was really amazing just to, do something different. And like you said, it did really accelerate what was coming up for me, and a lot of creativity and things, areas kind of been stuck in. I felt were just kind of blowing open. I was like, this is great. And it's not a mind altering substance, right? Like
Exactly.
it was all naturally occurring. It was just, and your ability to facilitate that process was beautiful. So you definitely have a gift from the goddess, and I'm just so grateful to have connected with you and to spend some time today sharing your journey and the story of cacao as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, just, and that, if anybody wants to learn more about chocolate in
Yeah.
general, I do have an educational page on Facebook. It's called Heal Your Heart with Chocolate. And there's lots of freebie information there.
Hmm.
Just chocolate 101, how chocolate, why chocolate, what is, what the heck this is, how to drink at home and make it like a daily practice or
Hmm.
once a week practice. How it incorporates well with other modalities, and then also opportunities and invitations for offerings. I oftentimes do virtual
Hmm.
circles utilizing chocolate. So yeah, you can come hang out there, ask questions, learn all about it in that space. Yeah.
Sounds great. Well, thank you again for your time today. It's been so awesome to talk more about this, and just very grateful to be in your space.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jen. I just wanted to acknowledge you and whoever might be listening that, Jen is doing such an amazing job of bringing spirit back to the bedside. I've gotten to observe she's our nursing educator, and just our professional enrichment days. People are looking forward to them. I look forward to
Oh,
them.
good.
We get to really kind of tap in and remember our why. And there are some amazing initiatives she's been putting together for our hospital. So I'm so grateful. And
Thank you.
you're a special being, and you're a great example of bringing spirit to the bedside. And yeah, I'm in awe. So I
Thank
appreciate you.
Thank you. I got a little teary-eyed. Yeah, and you've really helped me integrate some of that work too, because I'm still new to this space. So it's been trying to figure it out and bounce things off of people. So it's been super fun to I guess kind of get creative and try different things that we don't normally see in the hospital. Like
Yeah,
we brought cacao
yeah,
into the hospital for a study for a session, and that was really neat. And I hope we can do that again soon. But it's
yeah.
been fun to just try different things, because what we've been doing hasn't really been working in the hospital setting, taking care of our nurses and our staff. And so I'm really hopeful that as we start to dabble and try different things, that we can help others on their journey too.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank
The
you.
world needs more Jen Wallace.
Oh, and more Citas for sure. We're super blessed. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.